I never imagined my marriage would unravel like it did. Jenna and I were married for 10 years, a decade filled with love, partnership, and shared dreams. Or so I thought. Looking back now, I see the cracks that I once ignored, chalking them up to the busyness of life. Her ambitious career in marketing meant constant travel, late-night meetings, and endless phone calls. I admired her drive, even if it meant sacrificing our time together. I thought I was supporting her, but maybe I was just enabling her to drift further away. It started with a whisper, a faint unease I couldn't shake. There were no glaring red flags, no lipstick-stained collars, or secretive phone calls in the dead of night. Instead, it was the little things. The way she stopped telling me about her day, the faraway look in her eyes, her sudden obsession with keeping her phone close. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Jenna was simply stressed. Then came that Tuesday, a day like any other, until it wasn't. Jenna was away on a business trip, and I was at home, finishing up work. Her usual routine involved sending a quick text or two before disappearing for hours. That day was no exception, but something about her messages felt colder, rehearsed. When her text came through saying she'd be out late with colleagues, I shrugged it off, though that sick feeling in my stomach grew heavier. An hour later, my phone rang. It wasn't her number, but I answered it anyway. "Hello?" I said, expecting a telemarketer or wrong number. Instead, I heard a man's voice, low and intimate, asking for Jenna. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I stayed on the line, not saying a word, as their conversation unfolded, casual and familiar in a way that sent chills down my spine. He teased her about their plans for the evening, and she laughed, a laugh I hadn't heard in years. "I can't wait to see you," she said, her voice light and eager. "You always know how to make me feel alive." Alive? Had I been killing her all these years? Was I just a convenience, a safety net while she sought thrills elsewhere? When the call ended, I stared at my phone, the conversation replaying in my head. My heart raced, my hands trembled. The woman I loved, the one I had built a life with, was betraying me in real time. It felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's tragedy unfold. But this was my life, and it was about to change forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind churned with questions I didn't want answers to. How long had this been going on? Who was he? Why wasn't I enough? I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all, but the only thing I knew for certain was that my marriage wasn't what I thought it was. The next day, I decided I couldn't sit idly by. I needed proof, concrete evidence to confirm what I already knew in my gut. Jenna had left her laptop at home, and though I felt a pang of guilt, I opened it. Her passwords were predictable, our anniversary. It struck me how easily she had trusted me with access to her life, even as she was betraying mine. Her email revealed everything. There were messages from someone named Greg, spanning months. They ranged from flirtatious exchanges to detailed plans for rendezvous during her business trips. Each word was like a knife, carving away at the foundation of my love for her. "I can't wait to hold you again," one email read. "Last night was incredible. I don't know how I've lived without this." My stomach churned as I scrolled further. The messages weren't limited to Greg. There were conversations with other men, some coworkers, others complete strangers. It wasn't just one affair. Jenna was chasing something, validation, excitement, or perhaps a part of herself I had never been able to reach. When Jenna returned from her trip that evening, I greeted her as I always did. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and launched into a rehearsed explanation of how exhausting her meetings had been. But now, I saw through the mask. Her words were hollow, her gestures mechanical. Every time she laughed, I wondered if she was thinking of Greg, or one of the others. Over dinner, I decided to test the waters. "How was New York?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "It was fine," she said, avoiding my gaze. "Same old meetings, same old clients. Did you have time to do anything fun? Meet anyone interesting?" I probed, careful not to sound accusatory. She hesitated for the briefest moment before replying, "No, just work. You know how it is." That hesitation was all I needed to confirm she was lying. I played along, pretending everything was fine, while anger and betrayal simmered beneath the surface. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. I needed to be strategic. If I acted impulsively, she'd twist the narrative, make it about my lack of trust, my paranoia. No, I needed to bide my time. That night, as Jenna slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, staring at the woman I no longer recognized. The laughter she shared with me felt rehearsed, her love, a facade. I realized I wasn't just dealing with infidelity. I was dealing with someone who had chosen to rewrite the rules of our marriage without telling me. I promised myself that when the time came, she would feel the weight of her choices. But first, I needed more. If Jenna wanted a secret life, I would uncover every last piece of it. Over the following days, I dove deeper into Jenna's secret life. It became an obsession, a need to understand just how far she had gone. The betrayal wasn't just about Greg or the other men. It was about the life she had crafted without me, a life where I was the outsider looking in. Her phone was my next target. It was always within arm's reach, but I managed to unlock it one evening while she was in the shower. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her messages, her calendar, her photos. The deeper I went, the sicker I felt. Her messages with Greg were worse than I had imagined. They weren't just about physical intimacy. They were about intimacy I thought we shared. She confided in him, complained about me, laughed at my quirks. He still doesn't know, one message read. I think he suspects something, but he's too passive to confront me. My chest tightened as I read those words. Too passive? Maybe she was right. I had spent years accommodating her career, her ambitions, her independence. I never asked for more because I thought I was being supportive. But now, I realized she had mistaken my patience for weakness. The photos told an even darker story. Pictures of Jenna in lingerie I had never seen. Her lips curled into a sultry smile meant for someone else. Selfies from hotel rooms, captions like, "Counting down the hours until I see you." The person in those photos wasn't my wife. She was someone I didn't know. Someone who didn't care how much she was destroying me. I found her browsing history next. It was a trail of deceit. Searches for secret dating apps, forums about extramarital affairs, and even tips on how to avoid getting caught. She had planned every step, calculated every move. And yet, she hadn't bothered to cover her tracks. Maybe she thought I wouldn't look. Or maybe she didn't care if I found out. The final discovery was the hardest to stomach. A shared calendar entry with Greg titled, "Weekend Getaway." It was set for the coming Friday, 2 days from now. A quaint little bed and breakfast in the countryside. A place we had once visited together, back when we were still in love. That night, I barely ate. Jenna noticed my silence and asked if I was feeling okay. I nodded, forcing a smile, even as my heart pounded with rage. Every time she touched me, I flinched internally, repulsed by the thought of where her hands had been. As I lay awake beside her again, the weight of everything I discovered pressed down on me. I could feel the rage building, the need to confront her, to scream, to break something. But I knew that wasn't the answer. Jenna had built this web of lies carefully, methodically. If I confronted her now, she'd deny everything, spin a story to make herself the victim. No, I couldn't let her control the narrative. I had to play this game by her rules. If she wanted secrets, I'd keep mine. If she wanted lies, I'd give her truth in the cruelest way possible. I wasn't just going to expose her. I was going to make her regret ever thinking she could betray me. The days leading up to Friday were excruciating. I moved through my routines on autopilot, every moment laced with simmering anger and the urge to confront Jenna. But I didn't. I wore the mask she had crafted for me, the devoted husband, too blind or naive to notice the cracks in our marriage. She was so convinced of her control over the situation that she didn't suspect a thing. On Thursday evening, Jenna was in an unusually good mood. She hummed while preparing dinner, a cheerful rhythm that grated on my nerves. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and she glanced at the screen, her lips curling into a small, secretive smile. She must have thought I didn't notice. "Everything okay?" I asked, my tone light. "Yeah, just Monica," she lied effortlessly. Monica was her go-to excuse, a coworker she often used to explain late nights or weekend plans. I almost admired how seamlessly the lie slipped from her lips. Later that night, as she packed for her work retreat, I watched her from the doorway of our bedroom. She was careful, meticulous, choosing outfits she'd never wear around me. I wondered if Greg appreciated the effort, if he saw the side of her that I had once adored. "Are you sure you'll be okay while I'm gone?" she asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Of course," I replied, managing a tight smile. "You deserve a break." Her eyes softened, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with, the one who used to light up at the sight of me. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who had decided I wasn't enough. When she went to bed, I stayed up, staring at the guest room ceiling. It was ironic how she trusted me enough to leave her secrets unguarded while I was unraveling her entire facade. My plan was coming together. I had already arranged time off work, rented a car to avoid recognition, and scoped out the bed and breakfast where she and Greg would meet. I knew every detail of their itinerary, down to the room number she had booked. The idea of seeing them together, confirming what I already knew, made my stomach churn. But I needed to see it. I needed to witness the betrayal with my own eyes, to feel the pain fully so that I could channel it into the revenge I was planning. Before going to bed, I sent a message to Jenna's mother, who adored me and had always viewed our marriage as the gold standard. I told her I had something important to discuss with her and suggested we meet the following week. Jenna's family would be an important piece of this puzzle, one I intended to use to full effect. Finally, I pulled out the small hidden camera I had purchased and placed it carefully inside her suitcase. If she was going to destroy what we had built, she wasn't going to do it in secret. I would ensure every deceitful moment was documented. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The anger was still there, burning quietly, but it was joined by something colder: resolve. Jenna's lies had broken me, but I wasn't going to let them define me. Tomorrow, she would leave for her work retreat, unaware that I would be following her. And by the end of the weekend, she would learn what it felt like to be truly exposed. Friday morning arrived with an air of deceptive normalcy. Jenna floated through her routine, all smiles and lightness, while I played my role as the oblivious husband. She kissed me goodbye, her lips brushing my cheek with the same affection she once reserved for me alone. "Don't work too hard while I'm gone," she said with a wink. "I won't," I replied, masking the bitterness in my voice. I watched her pull out of the driveway, the wheels of her car carrying her further away from the life we had built and deeper into the arms of her lover. As soon as she turned the corner, I sprang into action. My bag was already packed, my rented car parked a few streets away. Within minutes, I was on the road, tailing her from a safe distance. The drive to the countryside was long, and every mile felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I followed her car carefully, keeping enough distance to avoid suspicion. Jenna didn't even glance in her rearview mirror, completely unaware of the man trailing her. It struck me how comfortable she had become in her deception, how little she thought of the person she was betraying. She stopped once at a gas station, and I waited several minutes before pulling in. From the corner of my eye, I watched her grab a coffee and scroll through her phone, probably messaging Greg. She smiled at the screen, a private joy that should have been reserved for me. When she returned to her car and drove off, I followed, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and anticipation. I rehearsed what I might say when the moment came to confront her. Would I yell? Cry? Or would I let her see the depth of my pain in silence? An hour later, we arrived at the bed and breakfast. It was a picturesque place nestled among rolling hills and blooming gardens, the kind of romantic escape she and I used to dream about. I parked a safe distance away and watched as Jenna exited her car. She looked radiant, wearing a dress I had never seen before, her hair styled just so. Moments later, Greg arrived in a sleek black car. He stepped out, his confidence radiating as he approached Jenna. She lit up at the sight of him, throwing her arms around his neck and kissing him passionately. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched them, my heart breaking all over again. They walked into the building together, hand in hand, completely unaware of the storm brewing just beyond their idyllic getaway. I waited until they disappeared inside before stepping out of my car. My plan was simple: gather undeniable proof of their betrayal, and confront Jenna in the most devastating way possible. I checked into a room a few doors down from theirs, using a fake name and paying in cash to avoid detection. Once inside, I set up my equipment, a small camera hidden in the corner of the hallway, trained on their door. If Jenna wanted to play games, I would ensure she couldn't hide the evidence. For the next few hours, I paced my room, waiting and watching. Through the camera feed, I saw them come and go, laughing, touching, and sharing moments that once belonged to us. Each second was another wound, but I refused to turn away. I needed to see this through. That evening, they left for dinner, walking arm in arm to a nearby restaurant. I followed at a distance, snapping photos of their intimate exchanges. When they returned, Jenna was laughing, her head resting on Greg's shoulder as they entered their room. The door clicked shut behind them, and I clenched my fists, knowing what would come next. I waited outside their door, my hidden camera capturing every sound. The muffled laughter, the whispered words, the rustle of fabric. My mind raced, torn between bursting in and waiting for the perfect moment. My heart begged for confrontation, but my head told me to stay the course. The night stretched on, every sound from their room a reminder of Jenna's betrayal. By the time I returned to my own room, I was exhausted, drained by the weight of what I had witnessed. But I knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, the real confrontation would begin. And Jenna would learn that the man she thought she had outsmarted was one step ahead of her all along. Saturday morning dawned cold and gray, the cheerful chirping of birds an insult to the storm brewing inside me. I had spent the night reviewing the footage from the camera, every frame another stab to the heart. Jenna and Greg, locked in an embrace, kissing like teenagers discovering love for the first time. It was sickening. I knew today was the day. I had everything I needed, evidence of her betrayal, a plan for my confrontation, and a resolve forged in pain. But it wasn't enough to just confront her. She needed to feel the weight of her choices, to see the destruction she had wrought. By mid-morning, they emerged from their room, looking like a couple on a honeymoon. Greg held her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles as they walked to the breakfast area. Jenna's laughter carried through the hallway, a cruel echo of the joy she had once shared with me. I followed them at a distance, sitting in the corner of the dining room with a newspaper as my shield. They didn't notice me, too absorbed in their private bubble. Watching them eat together, their heads bent close as they whispered and smiled, made my blood boil. How could she do this? How could she erase a decade of love and commitment so easily? When they left the dining room, I paid my bill and returned to my room, waiting for their next move. Through the camera feed, I saw them head toward the garden, arm in arm. Perfect. I grabbed the envelope I had prepared the night before. Inside were the photos I had taken, screenshots of her messages, and a handwritten note. It was simple. You thought I wouldn't find out? You were wrong. I slipped the envelope under their door and then retreated to a bench in the garden, ensuring I had a clear view of the chaos about to unfold. My heart pounded as I waited, adrenaline coursing through me. Would she read it? Would she come running? 10 minutes later, I saw Greg return to the room alone. Jenna followed shortly after, her smile fading the moment she opened the envelope. From where I sat, I could see her face pale, her eyes scanning the contents with growing horror. She turned to Greg, her mouth moving rapidly, but her words didn't reach me. Greg's expression hardened as he read over her shoulder. He glanced toward the garden, his eyes narrowing as they landed on me. For a moment, I thought he might storm over, but instead, he turned his attention back to Jenna. They argued, their voices muffled but unmistakably heated. Jenna bolted out of the room moments later, her eyes wild as she scanned the garden. When she saw me, she froze. The color drained from her face, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She approached cautiously, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" I stood, every emotion I had bottled up threatening to spill over. "Watching my wife throw away everything we built," I said, my voice calm but laced with venom. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, struggling to find words. I can explain." I laughed bitterly. "Explain? I've read the messages, Jenna. I've seen the photos. I've heard everything. What could you possibly say that would make this better? Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't move me. It's not what you think, she whispered. It's exactly what I think, I shot back. And now everyone will know. Your friends, your family, my lawyer. She gasped, the weight of my words hitting her like a freight train. Please, she begged, stepping closer. We can fix this. I took a step back, shaking my head. You already broke it, Jenna. You didn't just cheat. You destroyed us. Greg appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of anger. What the hell are you doing, man? This is between you and her. I turned to him, my voice cold. You don't get to tell me what this is. You're just another piece of her lies. He flinched but didn't respond. I turned back to Jenna, my heart heavy but resolute. You wanted new sensations, new excitement? Congratulations, you got them. But now you'll have to live with the consequences. Without another word, I walked away, leaving Jenna standing there, tears streaming down her face. I didn't look back. I couldn't. This wasn't over, not yet. But for the first time in months, I felt in control. Jenna had made her choices, and now it was my turn. Driving home that evening was a surreal experience. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on me, but there was also a strange sense of liberation. For months, I had been living in the shadow of Jenna's lies, but now the truth was out. The game was over, at least for her. When I arrived home, I poured myself a drink and sat in the silence of our living room, staring at the pictures on the wall. Smiling faces, happy memories, a life that now felt like a cruel joke. I couldn't keep them up anymore. One by one, I took the photos down, shoving them into a box I planned to throw out later. As I worked, my phone buzzed relentlessly on the coffee table. Jenna. I ignored her calls, her texts, her desperate attempts to reach me. Each message was a variation of the same plea, please talk to me. I can explain. Don't do this to us. To us? The audacity of her words fueled my anger. I wasn't the one who had done this. She had made her choices. Now, she would have to live with them. After hours of silence from me, her texts took on a darker tone. If you loved me, you'd give me a chance to explain. I made a mistake, but we can work through this. You're just trying to punish me. This isn't fair. Fair. The word echoed in my mind. She thought this wasn't fair? I had sacrificed for her, supported her, loved her unconditionally, and she thought this was unfair? I laughed bitterly, tossing my phone onto the couch. By the time the sun set, I was ready for the next step in my plan. I sent a text to Jenna's parents, letting them know I needed to talk to them urgently. Her mother responded almost immediately, concerned and eager to meet. I didn't tell them everything in the text. This wasn't a conversation to have over the phone, but I made it clear that it was serious. The following morning, I met them at their home. Her mother greeted me with a warm smile, but her face fell the moment she saw my expression. What's wrong, honey? She asked, ushering me inside. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. The messages, the photos, the lies. I didn't hold back, showing them the undeniable evidence of Jenna's betrayal. Her father sat silently, his face turning red with anger, while her mother broke down in tears. I thought we raised her better than this, her mother sobbed. How could she do this to you? To us? Her father clenched his fists, his voice shaking with rage. That girl is going to hear from me. I'll make sure she knows exactly how much she's hurt this family. I didn't expect their reaction to be so visceral, but it was clear they were as devastated as I was. Jenna had always been the golden child, the one they bragged about to friends and neighbors. Now, that image was shattered. I'm not telling you this to turn you against her, I said, though I knew it was too late for that. I just thought you deserved to know the truth. Her father nodded, his jaw tight. You did the right thing. And if there's anything we can do to help, just say the word. When I left their house, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. Jenna's betrayal wasn't just a personal wound. It had ripple effects that she couldn't control. She wanted to rewrite the rules, but now the people she cared about most were seeing the truth. As I drove back home, my phone buzzed again. Jenna. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened her latest message. I'll be home tomorrow. We need to talk. Tomorrow. She was coming back, expecting to salvage the wreckage of our marriage. She didn't realize the storm that awaited her. I had no intention of letting her back into my life, not without making her face the full weight of her actions. And so, I began to prepare for her return. Every photo of us, every reminder of our life together, was packed away. Her clothes, her belongings, everything she might claim as hers was boxed and waiting by the door. This wasn't her home anymore. She had made sure of that. When she walked through that door, she wouldn't find the life she had abandoned. She would find a man she didn't recognize, a man ready to reclaim his dignity and deliver the reckoning she deserved. Sunday morning came, heavy with anticipation. Jenna was due to return any moment, and I was ready. Her belongings were stacked neatly by the door, each box a symbol of the life she had discarded. I sat in the living room, sipping coffee, my mind replaying every betrayal like a broken record. The sound of her car in the driveway snapped me out of my thoughts. My heart pounded as I heard the key turn in the lock. The door swung open, and there she stood, dressed casually, her suitcase trailing behind her. For a moment, she froze, taking in the sight of her packed belongings. "What's all this?" she asked, her voice shaky. I set my mug down and stood, my expression cold. "This is your new reality." She laughed nervously, as if I were joking. "Come on, don't be like this. Let's talk." I crossed my arms. "Talk? Like you talked to Greg? Or the others?" Her face fell, her attempt at control slipping. "I can explain," she started, but I cut her off. "Explain? Do you think there's anything you can say that will erase what you've done? I've read the messages, Jenna. I've seen the photos. I've heard the calls. You lied, you cheated, and now you want to talk?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. "It wasn't like that," she whispered. "It wasn't." I shot back. "So, sneaking around, sleeping with other men, and lying to my face wasn't like that? Then what was it, Jenna?" Her tears spilled over, her voice breaking. I was lost. I didn't know how to stop. I laughed bitterly. "You didn't want to stop. You wanted to have your fun, to feel alive, while I stayed here, faithful, waiting for the scraps of your attention. I never stopped loving you," she pleaded, stepping closer. "I made a mistake, but I still love you." I took a step back, her words stinging like acid. "You don't love me. You love the idea of me, someone who would stick around no matter how badly you treated them. But guess what, Jenna? I'm done being your fool." Her sobs grew louder, but I was resolute. "Your parents know," I added. "They've seen the evidence. They're as disgusted as I am." Her hand flew to her mouth, a strangled cry escaping her lips. "You told them," she choked out. "Of course I did," I said. "You don't get to walk away from this unscathed. You wanted a new life? Congratulations, you've got it. But it won't include me." She fell to her knees, her tears pooling on the floor. "Please," she begged, "don't do this." I turned away, unwilling to let her see how much her words hurt. "Take your things and leave, Jenna. We're done." Jenna didn't leave right away. She sat on the floor, sobbing, clutching at the remnants of our life. When she finally stood, her face streaked with tears, she looked at me with a desperation I hadn't seen before. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked, her voice small. "Not my problem," I replied. "Call Greg. I'm sure he'll be happy to take you in." Her expression darkened. "He's not who you think he is. He's married." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I know exactly who he is. And I'm sure his wife will be thrilled to learn what he's been up to. Don't think I won't tell her." "Don't," she pleaded. "Please, don't ruin his life." "Why not?" I snapped. "You had no problem ruining mine." She reached for me, but I stepped back, her touch repulsive. "Go, Jenna," I said firmly. "This isn't your home anymore." She finally gave up, gathering her things and leaving without another word. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I had won the battle, but the war had left me scarred. The days after Jenna's departure were a blur. I threw myself into work, filling my time with anything that kept me from thinking about her. Friends and family rallied around me, offering support and advice. I appreciated their concern, but I needed to heal on my own. I changed the locks, redecorated the house, and removed every trace of Jenna from my life. It was cathartic, a way of reclaiming the space she had tainted. But no matter how much I cleaned, I couldn't scrub away the memories. I reached out to a lawyer, beginning the process of divorce. It was messy, as I expected, but I didn't care about the material things. All I wanted was to be free of her. Jenna tried to reach me several times over the following weeks. She sent letters, left voicemails, even showed up at my office once. Each time, I ignored her. I had nothing left to say. Her apologies meant nothing. They couldn't undo the damage she had caused. One day, I received a package from her. Inside was a handwritten letter, along with photos from our early years together. The letter was full of regret, promises to change, and pleas for forgiveness. I read it once, then threw it away. Her words were too little, too late, as promised. I contacted Greg's wife. She was shocked but grateful for the information, confirming that her husband had a history of infidelity. Together, we dismantled his lies, ensuring he faced the consequences of his actions. The divorce was finalized a few months later. Jenna tried to fight for more than she deserved, but the evidence of her infidelity worked in my favor. She left with nothing but her guilt, while I began to rebuild my life. In the months that followed, I focused on myself. Therapy helped me process the betrayal, while reconnecting with old friends reminded me of who I was before Jenna. Slowly but surely, I started to heal. One year after Jenna walked out of my life, I stood in the same house, but everything was different. I was different. The scars she left behind were still there, but they no longer defined me. I had found peace, and for the first time in a long time, I was happy. Jenna had taken so much from me, but she hadn't taken everything. I still had my dignity, my strength, and a future that was mine to reclaim. And that was more than enough.